The story of the 10 lost tribes of Israel is honestly one of history's most captivating and enduring mysteries. A tale that's echoed through the corridors of time for more than 2.5 millennia. It all begins with a historical event, the conquest of an ancient kingdom, but quickly blossoms into a powerful legend that's inspired explorers, fueled religious movements, and shaped the identity of countless communities across the globe. This narrative, a potent blend of scripture, history, and myth, really speaks to a deep human longing for connection, for roots that stretch back to a sacred past. The very idea of entire nations of people, scattered to the four corners of the earth yet holding on to a shared heritage, continues to fascinate scholars, theologians, and dreamers alike. The central question that has driven this centuries-long quest is deceptively simple. What truly became of the people of the ancient northern kingdom of Israel? After their homeland was conquered by the formidable Assyrian Empire in the 8th century BCE, the biblical account describes their deportation to distant lands, after which they just seemed to vanish from the historical record. This abrupt disappearance created a vacuum that's been filled by an extraordinary tapestry of theories and claims. The legend of the lost tribes is not merely an academic puzzle, it's a living story that's been woven into the fabric of Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions, influencing everything from medieval maps to modern-day quests for identity and belonging. This essay will journey into the heart of this profound mystery, exploring its origins in biblical texts and historical events. We'll examine the forces that gave rise to the legend and trace its remarkable journey through different eras and cultures. From the mountains of Afghanistan to the jungles of Africa, and from the plains of North America to the islands of Japan, numerous groups have laid claim to the heritage of the lost tribes. We'll investigate these claims, weighing the historical, archaeological, and genetic evidence against the powerful pull of tradition and faith, seeking to understand why this ancient story continues to hold such sway over the human imagination. Ultimately, the search for the lost tribes reveals as much about the searchers as it does about the lost. It's a testament to the power of narrative to shape identity and build community. Whether a historical reality, a powerful myth, or something in between, the legacy of the 10 lost tribes is a profound exploration of memory, exile, and the unyielding hope of return. It challenges us to consider how we construct our own histories and how stories of the past continue to define our present and inspire our future. The quest is ongoing, a timeless search for a scattered family and a lost home. The story of the lost tribes begins deep within the pages of the Hebrew Bible, which establishes the people of Israel as a confederation of 12 distinct tribes. According to the book of Genesis, these tribes are the descendants of the 12 sons of the patriarch Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel after he wrestled with an angel. These sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, and the 2 sons of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim, became the progenitors of the nation. This 12-tribe structure served as the foundational organizing principle for the Israelite people. It defined their social, political, and even military identity after their exodus from Egypt and conquest of the land of Canaan. For a time, under the celebrated reigns of King David and his son King Solomon, these 12 tribes were united into a single, powerful monarchy with its capital in Jerusalem. This period, often looked back upon as a golden age, represented the pinnacle of Israelite unity and strength. The kingdom flourished, and the first temple, built by Solomon, stood as the central point of worship and national identity. However, the biblical narrative in the first book of Kings details how this unity was fragile. Following Solomon's death around 930 BCE, internal tensions over taxation and forced labor, combined with political rivalries, boiled over, leading to a dramatic and fateful split. The unified kingdom fractured into 2 separate and often rival nations. In the south, the tribes of Judah and the much smaller Benjamin remained loyal to the Davidic dynasty, forming the Kingdom of Judah with Jerusalem as its capital. The people of this kingdom would come to be known as Judahites, the precursors to the modern word Jews. The other 10 tribes, located to the north, broke away to establish the independent northern kingdom of Israel. This larger and more prosperous kingdom established its own capitals, first at Shechem and later at Samaria, and developed its own distinct political and religious traditions, often in direct opposition to the southern kingdom. This division set the stage for the tragic events that would follow. The two kingdoms, though sharing a common ancestry and language, were frequently at odds, engaging in political maneuvering and intermittent warfare for the next 2 centuries. The biblical authors, writing primarily from the perspective of the southern kingdom of Judah, often depicted the northern kingdom as having strayed from the proper worship of God, setting up alternative shrines and falling into idolatry. This theological critique would heavily influence how the subsequent fate of the northern tribes was interpreted, framing their eventual downfall not just as a political catastrophe, but as a divine punishment for their perceived sins. The existence of the two Hebrew kingdoms unfolded under the shadow of rising superpowers in Mesopotamia. By the 8th century BCE, the Neo-Assyrian Empire had emerged as the dominant military force in the ancient Near East, embarking on a relentless campaign of expansion. The smaller kingdoms of the Levant, including the northern kingdom of Israel, were caught in its path. Despite attempts to resist through alliances and tribute payments, the fate of the northern kingdom was sealed. Around 722 BCE, the Assyrian army, under King Shalmaneser V and Sargon II, laid siege to and ultimately conquered Samaria, the capital of the Kingdom of Israel, bringing its 2-century history to an end. The biblical account of this event, found in the 2nd book of Kings, chapter 17, is stark and definitive. It states that the king of Assyria carried the Israelites away to Assyria and placed them in Halah, on the Habor, the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. This passage is the textual cornerstone for the entire legend of the lost tribes. It describes a mass deportation, a forced removal of the Israelite population from their ancestral homeland to the far-flung regions of the Assyrian Empire, located in what is now northern Iraq and Syria. The Bible presents this exile as a punishment for the northern kingdom's religious transgressions, and explicitly states that they were replaced by foreign peoples whom the Assyrians settled in their place. This narrative of complete removal and replacement is what creates the mystery. By depicting the deportation as a comprehensive event that emptied the land of its native population, the biblical text effectively writes the 10 tribes out of the subsequent history of the region. They are taken away, and according to this account, they never return. This stark finality leaves a haunting question mark hanging over their destiny. Where did they go? Did they maintain their identity in exile? Did they assimilate into the surrounding cultures, or did they wander to even more distant lands? The ambiguity and lack of further detail in the scriptural record provided fertile ground for centuries of speculation. In stark contrast, the southern kingdom of Judah managed to survive for another 136 years before it too was conquered, this time by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. The people of Judah also experienced a similar exile, but their fate was different. After several decades in Babylon, the Persian Empire conquered the Babylonians and allowed the Judahite exiles to return to their homeland and rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. It was these returning exiles who would go on to form the nucleus of the Jewish people, and their scribes were the primary editors of the Hebrew Bible. Their story became one of survival and return, while the story of their northern brethren became one of disappearance and loss. While the biblical narrative presents a dramatic tale of a complete population removal, modern historical and archaeological scholarship offers a more nuanced and complex picture of the Assyrian conquest. For decades, historians have critically re-examined Assyrian policies and combed through archaeological findings to better understand what truly transpired in the 8th century BCE. The consensus among most contemporary scholars is that the account in 2 Kings, while reflecting a historical reality of conquest and deportation, likely exaggerates the scale of the exile for theological and political purposes. The idea of the entire population being carried off into oblivion is now largely seen as a literary and religious framing rather than a precise historical report. Assyrian records and archaeological evidence from the period suggest that their policy of deportation was strategic and targeted, not a wholesale ethnic cleansing. The Assyrians typically focused on deporting the ruling class, the military leadership, skilled artisans, scribes, and other urban elites. The primary goal of this knowledge industry extraction was to cripple the conquered state's ability to rebel, while simultaneously enriching the Assyrian heartland with skilled labor and intellectual capital. Tens of thousands of Israelites were indeed exiled, a traumatic and significant event. However, this would have left a substantial portion of the population, primarily rural farmers, laborers, and the lower classes, remaining in the land of the former Northern Kingdom. Archaeological surveys of the region support this revised understanding. While major cities like Samaria show clear evidence of destruction and a change in material culture, many smaller rural villages and towns in the territory of the former Northern Kingdom show signs of continuity. Life went on, albeit under new Assyrian rule. Furthermore, it is highly probable that many Israelites, fearing the advancing Assyrian army, did not wait to be deported. Instead, they likely fled south as refugees, seeking safety in the neighboring kingdom of Judah. Evidence for this influx can be seen in the dramatic expansion of Jerusalem and other Judahite towns around this very time, suggesting they absorbed a significant number of their northern kin. This modern perspective fundamentally reframes the mystery. If the majority of the northern Israelites were never lost to begin with, the question changes. The focus shifts from a search for vanished peoples in distant lands to an investigation of how the remaining population and the refugees integrated and evolved. Many of those who remained in the north likely assimilated over time, with the new populations brought in by the Assyrians and with the surrounding cultures. Those who fled south to Judah would have gradually merged with the Judahite population, contributing their traditions and bloodlines to the people who would eventually become known as the Jews. The tribes were not so much lost as they were transformed and absorbed. Among the many groups connected to the legacy of the Northern Kingdom, the Samaritans present one of the most direct and, honestly, compelling claims of descent. The Samaritans are a small, ancient ethno-religious community, numbering less than 1,000 people today, who live primarily in two locations, near their holy site, Mount Gerizim, overlooking the modern West Bank city of Nablus, which was actually the ancient Shechem, and in the city of Holon, near Tel Aviv. For millennia, they've maintained a belief that they are the direct descendants of the Israelite tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, who were never exiled by the Assyrians. They sort of represent a living counter-narrative to the Judahite-centric biblical account. For centuries, the Samaritan identity was viewed through the lens of their historical rivals, the Jews. The narrative in 2 Kings chapter 17, written from a Judahite perspective, actually portrays the inhabitants of the north after 722 BCE as a mixed population descended from foreign colonists brought in by the Assyrians, who then adopted a syncretic and, well, improper form of Israelite worship. This portrayal really cast the Samaritans as inauthentic and their religious practices as illegitimate. This historical animosity is even reflected in the New Testament, where interactions between Jews and Samaritans are often, fraught with tension. The Samaritans, however, have always rejected this version of their history, insisting on their pure Israelite lineage. The Samaritans possess their own distinct version of the Torah, known as the Samaritan Pentateuch, which is written in an ancient Hebrew script. While it's largely similar to the Jewish Torah, it contains significant variations, most notably its designation of Mount Gerizim, not Jerusalem's Temple Mount, as the one true holy place chosen by God for worship. This belief lies at the heart of their religious identity, and really represents the continuation of a northern Israelite tradition that predates the Babylonian exile of Judah. Their traditions, rituals, and calendar are all preserved as what they believe to be the original, unchanged religion of the ancient Israelites. In recent decades, modern scholarship has lent significant weight to the Samaritans' claims. Historical analysis and, most powerfully, genetic studies have largely supported their account of their origins. DNA research has demonstrated a clear and direct ancestral link between the Samaritans and ancient Israelite populations, shared with Jewish communities, but distinct enough to show a separation dating back thousands of years. This evidence strongly suggests that the Samaritan community is indeed a remnant of the northern Israelite population that remained in the land. They are not lost because, in their view, they were never gone, faithfully maintaining their heritage in their ancestral homeland for over 2,700 years. As centuries went by, the ambiguity of the biblical account of the lost tribes really allowed the legend to grow and, morph, capturing the imagination of both Jewish and Christian thinkers in the medieval world. The story shifted from being just a historical memory into this powerful eschatological myth, tied to prophecies about the end times and the eventual redemption of the world. Jewish travelers and mystics, in particular, kept the hope alive that they might one day find their long-lost brethren. Figures like Eldad Hadani, back in the 9th century, returned from their journeys with electrifying, though, let's be honest, probably fictional, tales of encountering powerful, independent Israelite kingdoms in Africa and Asia, supposedly descended from the tribes of Dan, Asher, Gad, and Naphtali. These stories, along with the writings of travelers like Benjamin of Tudela, fueled a widespread belief that the lost tribes were out there, beyond the borders of the known Christian and Islamic worlds, living behind some mythical barrier, like the impassable river Sambashan, which was said to rage for 6 days a week and rest only on the Sabbath. The legend also got tangled up with the European myth of Prester John, a fabled Christian king thought to rule a vast and wealthy kingdom in the east. Some versions of the Prester John legend claimed the lost tribes were his subjects, or lived on the edges of his realm, mighty warriors whom he kept contained until the end of days. When the Mongol invasions threatened Europe in the 13th century, some Christians even thought these fearsome horsemen might be the armies of Prester John coming to help. But, as the destructive power of the Mongols became clear, their identity was reinterpreted in a much darker way. They were recast as the lost tribes of Israel, emerging from their confinement as the apocalyptic hordes of Gog and Magog, sent to bring about the final judgment. All of this really shows how the legend was a flexible framework, one that could be adapted to explain new and frightening geopolitical realities, mapping ancient prophecies onto the events of the day. The dawn of the Age of Discovery in the 15th and 16th centuries opened up vast new horizons and gave the legend of the lost tribes a fresh canvas. As European explorers sailed to Africa, Asia, and the Americas, they carried the story with them, always searching for signs of the scattered Israelites among the new peoples they encountered. The legend became a lens, you could say, for interpreting unfamiliar cultures and customs. And finding the lost tribes wasn't just a matter of curiosity. For many, it was a theological imperative. Their discovery was seen as a necessary step for the Messianic age and the fulfillment of biblical prophecy, giving a sacred dimension to the whole project of global exploration and, honestly, colonization. With the European discovery of the Americas, a new and, well, pretty compelling candidate for the identity of the lost tribes suddenly emerged, the indigenous peoples of the New World. From the very beginning, European observers were struck by these unfamiliar cultures and tried to explain their origins through a biblical lens. The idea that Native Americans were the descendants of the exiled Israelites, often called the Hebraic Indian theory, became surprisingly popular and persistent. Those who supported this theory pointed to what they saw as similarities in customs, like supposed linguistic connections, tribal social structures, or religious practices that they interpreted as remnants of ancient Judaism. This idea was championed by all sorts of people, from Spanish priests to Puritan theologians in New England. For example, the Spanish missionary Diego Duran in the 16th century was one of the first to argue that the Aztecs had Israelite origins based on perceived parallels in their traditions. Later, in the 17th century, the English writer Thomas Thorogood published a book called And Manasseh ben Israel's influential work really pushed the idea in Europe, arguing that discovering the tribes in the New World was a sign that the Messianic era was just around the corner. This theory provided a way to fit the peoples of the Americas into a familiar biblical worldview. The idea gripped the American imagination well into the 19th century. Even Benjamin Rush, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, told the explorers Lewis and Clark to keep an eye out for Welsh-speaking or Hebrew-descended tribes during their famous expedition across the continent. But, this belief system had a darker side too. It often served to delegitimize indigenous cultures by framing them as degraded or forgotten versions of a more familiar Hebraic past. And that, in turn, helped justify European efforts to civilize or convert them. The most famous and lasting expression of the Hebraic Indian theory is found in the Book of Mormon, the foundational text of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which was first published in 1830. According to this text, a group of Israelites, mainly from the tribe of Manasseh, were guided by God to leave Jerusalem around 600 BCE and sail to the Americas. These people, known as the Nephites and Lamanites, are described as founding great civilizations on the continent, and the Lamanites are said to be the principal ancestors of the American Indians. This belief then places the Americas squarely within a biblical Israelite history. The connection between the lost tribes and the Americas, as laid out in the Book of Mormon, became a central tenet of faith for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The theology soon evolved beyond just identifying Native Americans as descendants of Israel. It expanded into the belief that all members of the Church, through conversion and faith, are gathered into the house of Israel, whether by literal bloodline or by adoption. This idea of a literal Israelite identity is deeply woven into LDS faith and is personalized for members through a sacred ritual called a patriarchal blessing, which often reveals a person's specific tribal lineage. For many Latter-day Saints, this lineage is declared to be from the tribe of Ephraim, one of Joseph's sons. In LDS theology, Ephraim has a special responsibility in the latter days to lead the effort to gather the scattered tribes of Israel from all over the world before the second coming of Jesus Christ. This belief gives church members a real sense of purpose and a direct connection to biblical prophecy. It transforms the legend of the lost tribes from an ancient mystery into a present-day mission, with the church acting as the primary instrument for this prophesied gathering. So the story isn't just history, it's an active, ongoing spiritual mandate. Another community whose modern identity has been profoundly shaped by the lost tribes legend is the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, also known as Ethiopian Jews. This community, which now numbers around 170,000, with most living in Israel, maintained a distinct form of Judaism in Ethiopia for centuries. Their own traditions, especially in the national epic known as the link their origins to the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon, claiming their royal dynasty descended from Menelik I, the son of Solomon and Sheba. When 19th century European travelers and Jewish scholars discovered the Beta Israel, they connected them to the ancient legends of Eldad Hadani, who had claimed the tribe of Dan lived in the land of Cush, or Ethiopia. This identification as the lost tribe of Dan had some huge real-world consequences. Now, the historical and genetic origins of the Beta Israel are complex, with evidence suggesting they arose from local Ethiopian populations who adopted Judaism, but the lost tribe narrative proved vital for their future. In the 1970s, facing persecution in Ethiopia, the community sought to immigrate to Israel. The chief rabbinate of Israel, after a lot of debate, officially recognized the Beta Israel as descendants of the tribe of Dan in 1975. This ruling, which was heavily influenced by the lost tribes legend, gave them the right to immigrate under Israel's law of return, leading to those dramatic airlifts, Operations Moses and Solomon, that brought tens of thousands to their new home. The saga of the 10 lost tribes of Israel is, honestly, a powerful testament to our human need for connection, identity, and narrative. What started as a regional political disaster in the ancient Near East has, over nearly 3,000 years, grown into a global story with deep cultural and religious significance. Whether it's rooted in solid history or, embellished by myth, the legend has given countless communities a framework to understand their past and imagine their future. From the steadfast Samaritans on Mount Gerizim to the Beta Israel of Ethiopia, from Latter-day Saints in Utah to groups in Afghanistan, the Pashtuns, India's B'nai Menashe, and even Japan's Makuya, the claim to Israelite ancestry continues to shape identities all over the world. The real power of the legend lies in its amazing adaptability. As scholars like Dr. Andrew Tobolowsky have explained, the Bible's segmented genealogy, the idea that a nation was born already divided into 12 distinct pieces, makes it conceptually easy for all sorts of groups to graft themselves onto that family tree. By claiming a connection to one of the lost branches, a community can insert itself into one of the world's most foundational religious stories, gaining a sense of ancient lineage and divine purpose. This process of becoming Israel has given a powerful sense of meaning and belonging to people who may have felt marginalized or disconnected from the big currents of history. In the modern era, science, especially genetics, has been brought in to try to solve the mystery. DNA testing has been used to both support and challenge the claims of various lost tribe communities. For example, genetic markers have strengthened the case for groups like the Samaritans and shown ancient Near Eastern links for some Jewish communities. But they've mostly disproven theories like the idea that indigenous peoples of the Americas descended from Israelites. Still, for a lot of people, identity isn't just a matter of blood or DNA. It's a tapestry, really, woven from shared memory, cultural practice, and communal belief. The story itself often holds more power than any scientific proof or disproof. Ultimately, the search for the lost tribes is a journey into the heart of how we create history and identity. The tribes may never be found in the way you'd find a sunken ship or a buried city, because honestly, they may not have been lost in the way the legend suggests. More likely, they were absorbed, transformed, and blended into other peoples, including the ancestors of modern Jews. But the story of their disappearance created a narrative space, a potent symbol of exile and the hope of return. And that story continues to inspire faith, build communities, and fuel our deep human desire to find a place in the grand, sprawling epic of history. The mystery endures, not because it's unsolved, but because it's just so profoundly meaningful.